This week we gear up for Mythodea by making some throwing knives. Welcome to LarpForge. Now there's less than 17 days left. Ooh, it's so good. It's so exciting. Okay. Last week we heated up the forge and made a latex sword. This week we are gonna make, as mentioned, some throwing knives.
What's special about throwing weapons is that, unlike normal melee weapons, throwing weapons have no core, which means they obviously don't work for blocking. They also tend to be very small, so they're easy to hide, and have rounded tips for safety. A good throwing knife also has some weight to it, so the wind don't take it. There's nothing worse than throwing the knife and then see it coming back at you.
Now, well, a good thing is throwing knives are fairly easy to make. And that's really good, because you can never really get enough.
Now the things you need for this are fairly similar to the things we needed for the sword. Just first get some foam, and here you can use some cheap foam, you don't need to go buy the expensive one. Then some liquid latex, recommended 0.2% ammoniac or less. Some acrylic paint, I bought black, white, silver and brown. Then some talcum powder, duct tape, of course. Some rice, and get some cheap rice, and various tools, containers, knives, brushes. Now this is pretty much the same technique as the sword. So we're going to start out with cutting out 3 layers of foam in the right shape, of course. And since there's no core, you could probably get away with only using 2 layers, thereby getting a thinner throwing knife. Now I needed to make some knives for me and a friend, so I made 4 large throwing knives and 4 smaller throwing knives. Now when you have cut it out, remember to cut the pointy tip off or make it round, unless you want somebody's eye to be poked out.
Which you do not. Hitting the face is against the rules, you know.
Now that you have that, it's time to put the weight in, or make the weight. And I'm gonna do that with duct tape and the rice. You could potentially use dry sand, don't use anything that's dangerous or weigh too much. A lot of bought throwing knives or throwing weapons have no weight in them because they want to be safe and everything, which is great, but when you make it yourself you can still put weight into it and make sure it's safe. Here I made some small tubes out of duct tape and I put some rice into it to give it just a little weight so it could withstand the wind and everything, so the knives don't throw or go everywhere. You could potentially use cloth and latex to do the same thing. I'm gonna put latex on them later, and I'm not gonna put cloth on, but if I did, that would also give a good amount of weight to it. Oh, and a thing I forgot to mention is, this probably looks a bit weird. I take the duct tape, turn it inside out. You get it? So the rice is on the silver side, which is on the inside of the tube. Then so it sticks much better to the knife. Okay, here I already have glued latex on the inside of the pieces. And then I cut out a small room for the tube in the midsection of the knife. And then just put them together and put the tube in so it fits. And then I covered the top part with latex so I can glue the last piece on. Now don't get confused, this latex is grey because it's a leftover from some old latex I had. I just used that. Once it's dry and I put it together, I start cutting the edge on the knife. And since there's no core inside, I don't really need to think about not getting too close to it. Of course there's the small tube inside, but it's still pretty soft and it's not that hard. So you can get a really nice edge on it. Now after all of this we start putting on the latex. I already have put some clear latex on, 1 or 2 coats, and then, well, I start putting on the grey coat so it gets the right color to look like it's actually made of metal. To do that, I take some of the latex, of course, put it in a container, and then I mix it up with the acrylic paint. I use the white and the black one to make a grey color, and then I apply some silver paint to give it sort of a shine to it. You know, metal is not all dull, and yeah, metal is kind of shiny when you look at it, and that's what the silver is for. Just watch out when you buy it, because you don't want to buy paint with actual metal in, because that's gonna destroy the latex later on. So buy acrylic paint that don't contain any metal but have this silver shine or bronze or whatever you want. And watch out not to use too much, otherwise you're gonna end up with pure silver weapons. And that's only gonna work for werewolves, trust me. About putting too much latex on the weapons, well, that's actually up to you how much you want, because
The more latex you put on, the more weight it gain, and the more weight it gain, well, the easier it's gonna be to throw.
but the harder it's also gonna hit. So it's something you have to feel, so to speak. Yeah, just try.
When you're finished giving it the base paint, the grey metal look,
Then you can start adding details in form of shadows, patterns, stuff like that. For instance, here I had this large throwing knives. They were supposed to have wooden handles. So I took some brown acrylic paints and latex and painted the handles brown. And you can also, if you want to make shades on it or give it a shiny look on the blade somewhere, you can take the rest of your metal latex mixture, add in a little more black. If you want to put a shade in, add a little more black, and then you can sort of paint it on very loosely where you want it. If you don't have more of the metal latex mix, you could take clear latex and a little black, and then sort of just hint it on the weapon. Because the latex is gonna turn clear, but the black will still be there, so it would be sort of like a shade. Now when it's all done, you just take your throwing knives and you put talcum powder on them. Yeah, or baby powder or whatever. So they don't stick to your clothes or stick to your other weapons or themselves or whatever. And just make sure it's all over the weapon. It's a good thing. Then later on you can start treating it with silicone spray or whatever you use. You could potentially also use flour, like for the flour used for baking. But I recommend talcum powder because it's the same thing used for babies, and you don't risk running into people who are actually allergic. Or it's also really easy to get out of your costume if you get it into that. That could be a problem with flour. I can't say that word. Ugh. So here we have them. The whiteness of the talcum powder here will wear off once they get used, else I think they turn out pretty good. I put on a small detail here on the handle on the small ones in form on some cotton string I just wrapped around, just to create a small detail so you can actually see what was blade and what was supposed to be the handle. It also gains some extra weight, so good thing there. Here I have an old store-bought throwing knife. Now granted, this is an old, cheap throwing knife, but I can clearly feel the difference, especially in the weight.
Now, let's see how they do in a throwing test. And what better way to do that than get a ninja to make the throw.
enough about that. Now, as you maybe could see, the homemade throwing knives actually flew a lot longer than the store-bought, and that's because the homemade had more weight in them. However, the store-bought actually flew a lot straighter, and that's because it's not made out of rolled up sleeping foam. But this is something you can actually work around if you train a little with the knives first. And that just keep in mind if you're looking to buy some, that you can actually make some yourself fairly easy and cheap, and in my opinion, better.
Now, only 2 weeks left for us to gear up in, so stay tuned for next episode, and until then, have a fair wind and soft shoes. Bye. Ow! Ow! Ow!